B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn Pesachim Daf Hey. We're going to start 12 lines from the bottom of Daf Dalet Omid Beis. And we're going to now learn about the timing of Erev Pesach, when the Isser of Chometz actually starts. Biblically, we'll touch on when rabbinically it starts, and the sources that we have for these halachas. Says the Gemara Tnan Hosom, we learned in a Mishnah. It's going to be a Mishnah later on Daf Yud Aleph Omid Beis. Reb Meir Oimer Oichlin Kol Chomish. One's allowed to eat chometz the whole fifth hour of the day. This is not 5 hours on our clock. Every hour is a 12th of the daytime, is every day hour. A 12th of the night, the length of the night is a night hour. The hours are not necessarily, they're usually not the same length depending on how long the day and night is. So if you split the day into 12, the first 5 hours of them, according to Rabbi Meir, you're actually allowed to eat chometz. V'soirfen b'tchilas sheish, and you burn the chometz during or at the beginning of the 6th hour of the day. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer oichlin kol arba. Rabbi Yehuda is a little bit more stringent. He's afraid people will get confused. He says eating chometz is only the first 4 hours of the day. V'toilin Kol Chomish. The 5th hour of the day is what we call it hangs. You're not allowed to eat it, but you don't have to burn it yet. You can allow your animals to eat the chometz. V'seirfen b'tchilas sheish, and the beginning of the 6th hour is when they burn it. Dekule al mamio chometz mishei shois u'lemayla osur. If the Chachamim are arguing and making additions, whether it's the 4th hour, the 5th hour, exactly how that works, it must be that beyond that, it must be that the Isser of Chometz beyond the 6th hour, from the beginning of the 7th hour, must be a biblical one. If it was just a rabbinical Isser, they wouldn't have had a whole machlokes as to how much to add on before it. So what if we see in the Mishnah that they're arguing about how many hours to add on before the beginning of the 7th hour, it must be that from the 7th hour is a biblical Isser to own Chometz, to eat Chometz, to have Chometz. And the Gemara is now asking, Minolon, where in the Torah, if you open up a Chumash, where can we expect to find the Torah telling us that from the end of the 6th hour of the day, that's from Chatzos, from the end of the 6th hour, it's biblically also to own and to eat Chometz. And the Gemara is now going to give us approximately 6 sources in the Torah, 6 different opinions, where in the Torah we find such an Issa. Omar Abaya. Abaya is the first one. Says Abaya, Trei kroi ksivi. There are 2 psukim in the Torah. Ksiv, it says in one pasuk, Shivas yomim sa'oir lo yimotzi b'boteichem. Sa'oir is similar to chometz, and this is going to be a Gemara, which we're not going to learn here. We're going to learn that in Beit Daf Zayin, exactly what's chometz, what's sa'oir. We'll see it a little bit later in this Masechta, but the pasuk says that one's not allowed to eat sa'oir 11 chometz from 7 days, which would seem to mean 7 full days. When does the first day start? At the night. The night of the first day, for 7 full days, you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to have chometz. That's the first pasuk. Lo yimotzi b'bateichem, chometz should not be found in your homes. Uchsiv, there's another pasuk that says, Ach b'yoyim harishon, on the first day, tashbisu sa'ir mi'bateichem. Sometime in the first day, get rid of the chometz. Destroy the chometz in your homes. How can that be? If some time in the first day you have to get rid of the chometz, that means that there's some part of the first day which you're allowed to have chometz. And if any part of the first day you're allowed to have chometz, then how do you have shivas yomim, 7 full days? Sa'ir lo yimotzi b'bateichem, chometz may not be found in your homes. Sabaya says that the word ach b'yoyim harishon must mean l'rabois arba osor lebiur. It must mean the B'yom Harishon doesn't mean the first of the 7. It means the one just prior to, that the day before the 7 days which is the 14th. On that day you have to destroy the chometz. Asks the Gemara, maybe no. Ve'ema l'rabbis leile chamisha osel lebiur. Maybe, even though normally days start in the night, as we know, but maybe when it says in the pasuk Shivas yomim sa'ir lo yimotzi b'boteichem, it means only days. That the 7 days that chometz mustn't be found is actually day, not nights, which means that from the first day in the morning, for 7 days no chometz, but the night of the first day, maybe as far as that pasuk is concerned, you're allowed to have chometz. And then the other pasuk of Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu So'im Ribatechem, that's going on the night of the first day. That's when you have to get rid of the chometz. The Sol Kedai Techamina, I may have thought Yomim Ksiv, since it says Shivas Yomim, it's only days. Yomim in Leilois Loi, the prohibition is only 7 days, but the first night not. Kumash Malona Filu Leilois, and that's why we have the second pasuk of Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, saying that sometime in that first night you have to get rid of the chometz. So if so, you don't have a source that you have to get rid of the chometz on the 14th of Nisan. Says the Gemara, no. Hahu lo yitzchok. I don't need to have a special pasuk to tell me that you're not allowed to have chometz anymore on the night of the first night of Pesach, the 15th, the night of the 15th of Nisan, and we don't need Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu to teach us, make sure to get rid of your chometz at the commencement of the night of the 15th. No. There's one pasuk that compares the requirement to get rid of chometz to the prohibition of eating chometz. There's a pasuk that compares eating chometz, or the prohibition of eating chometz, to the mitzvah of eating matzah. Where do we find in the pasuk that the requirement to get rid of chometz is compared to the prohibition of eating chometz? 7 days chometz should not be found in your homes. Because somebody who eats chometz on Pesach, he'll be punished with chorus. So we see there that getting rid of the chometz is somewhat connected to the issa of eating chometz. V'achilas chometz lechilas matzah. There's another pasuk that tells us that there's something similar to the time that one's not allowed to eat chometz to the time that one has to eat matzah. The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, a different pasuk, Kol machmetzes lo yisechelu, you're not allowed to eat any chometz. B'chol mishvesechem, in all your homes, toichlu matzahs, you should eat matzah. And regarding the time that one is required to eat matzah, it says be'erev toichlu matzahs, that the requirement to eat matzah starts at the commencement of the night of the 15th of Nisan. So, and if the eating matzah is from the beginning of the night of the 15th, then the issa of eating chometz is also from the night of the 15th. If so, the chiyuv to get rid of the chometz is also from the night of the 15th, which means that we already know that one's not allowed to have chometz by the time the 15th sets in, because of what we just learnt. And therefore, we have the question comes back, what does it mean, Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu? And Abaye explained it means Rishon, the one day just before the 15th, which is the 14th. Okay, says the Gemara. So if you know that the Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, the requirement to get rid of the chometz, is on the 14th of Nisan, maybe Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu is telling us that you have to get rid of the chometz already on the night of the 14th. We only do bedikas chometz on the night of the 14th, but we do sreifas chometz, we get rid of the chometz, as we said before, sometime on the 5th, on the day of the 5th of the 14th. But if you say that Ach Bayom Rishon is the 14th, who told you it's sometime in the middle of the day? Maybe it's already in the night. Says the Gemara by Yoyin Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, the time to get rid of chometz is in the day. Ve'ima mitzafra. Maybe the pasuk is telling us you have to get rid of it immediately at the beginning of the day, from Alois HaShachar, as daybreak. You have to get rid of the chometz. Who told you it's sometime in the middle of the day? And we said before that it was apparent from the Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph, the Machlokes Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda, that it's only after the 6th hour that you're not allowed to have the chometz anymore. Says the Gemara, Ach Cholok. Since it says in the pasuk, Ach Bayom Rishon, Ach is always an exclusion. It's always some of, part of. And since it says Bayom, the 14th, Ach Bayom Rishon means part of the 14th. You have to get rid of the chometz. So we split the 14th day into two. The first half of the day you're allowed to own chometz, but from the beginning of the second half of the day you're no longer allowed to own chometz. You're not allowed to have chometz. You have to burn it just before that. That was Abaya's proof and source that from the end of the 6th hour of the 14th of Nisan, one is not allowed to have any more chometz. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, they had a different source. And this is not to be confused with Rabbi Shmuel himself. Rabbi Shmuel, at the end of this Amud, he's actually going to have a different source. he's going to be, we'll see soon, there's going to be a different source according to Rabbi Shmuel, and Tosfos already points out that it's interesting that we have a Rabbi Shmuel saying a different source to the Debei Rabbi Shmuel, but Tosfos says that this is an occurrence we've seen elsewhere too. Says the Gemara, Debei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, Motzinu Yud Daled Shenikra Rishon. There's an explicit pasuk where we find that the 14th of Nisan is actually referred to as Rishon, as first. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, Barishon Barba Osar Yoim LaChodesh. It says in the pasuk that Barishon Barba Osar LaChodesh Bo'erev Teichlu Matzis. That the night after the 14th, that means Barishon Barba Osar Yoim LaChodesh. And really what it means, if you learn the Chumash, Barishon, it means in the first month of the year, which is Nisan. Barba Sayim LaChodesh, on the day of the 14th of Nisan, Bo'erev, in the evening, which is the night of the 15th, Teichlu Matzis, you eat matzis. But here the Gemara seems to be explaining that Barishon is a title given to Barba Sayim LaChodesh, Bo'erev, the night after the 14th. But the 14th itself is termed with Rishon. So, when it says in the pasuk, "Ach b'yom rishon tashbisu," you have to get rid of the chametz on the 14th. It means the rishon referred to in this pasuk of "Barishon barba soyem lachodesh." The 14th is called rishon. Get rid of your chametz on the 14th. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok Omar, a third source. Omar rishon de meikora mashma. Rishon normally means the first, and according to Abaya, we said that it must be the day, that it must be the 14th. Which is the day before the 15th. But we're not actually saying that the word Rishon itself means prior to. But here, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok is saying, I'll bring you source that the word Rishon, the translation of the word actually means prior to. So when it says, Ach b'yom Rishon, it means the day prior to the 7 days of Pesach. Where do we find that the word Rishon means prior to, before? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok Omar Rishon de meikora mashma de Omar Kra. There's a pasuk in Iyov actually. The pasuk says, "Harishon Adam tivoled." Were you born before Adam Rishon was? So the word Rishon there clearly means before, prior to. Same here. But Ach b'yom Rishon tashbisu means prior to the 7 days of Pesach. Asks the Gemara, if the word Rishon doesn't mean the first of, it means the day prior to, Elo me'ato, if so, what's going to be? We're going to find another 3 places where the word Rishon is used, and we have to understand, does it mean the first of, or does it mean the day prior to? We're going to have in the pasuk regarding taking a lulav on Sukkos, it says, V'lekachtem lochem b'yom harishon. We're going to find another pasuk that says, regarding the Isser to do melachos on Sukkos, that it's going to say in the pasuk, "B'yom harishon shabbosin" or "B'yom hashmini shabbosin," and we're going to have another pasuk regarding not doing melachos on Pesach, on Yom Tov of Pesach. It's going to say, "B'yom harishon mikra kodesh yalochem." We're going to find 3 places where it speaks about Rishon, and we have to understand in any of those psukim can it mean the day prior to? And the answer is obviously no. But then we have to understand how Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok assuming that Ach b'yom harishon means the day prior to. Says the Gemara, Elo me'ata v'lekachtem lochem b'yom harishon, that you have to take for yourselves on the first day of Sukkos, Pri'etz Hadar, Kapis Tamorim, etc. The Arba Minim. Hachnami Rishon to meikora mashma. Are you going to say that the day prior, so to speak, the day before Sukkos, you have to take the lulav? Of course not. Says the Gemara, that's different. There's a difference between the Rishon mentioned by Lulav and the Rishon of Ach b'yom Rishon tashbisu. Shani hasam dechsev osmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim. At the very end of that pasuk, the pasuk starts on lekachtem lechem b'yom Rishon. Pri'etz hadar kapis tamorim v'nafetz avos v'arvei nachal osmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim. Besides for taking the 4 minim, you also have to have simcha in front of Hashem 7 days. So we compare the first day to the 7 days. T'chsiv usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim. Ma shvi, in the same way as the 7 days, the 7th day is shvi'i lechag, is the 7th day of Yom Tov. Af Rishon, so too the Rishon mentioned at the beginning of the pasuk is Rishon lechag, is the first day of Sukkot, not the day prior to Sukkot. Asks the Gemara, Hochanami, let's get back to our pasuk of Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu. What does it say in the pasuk? The pasuk says, Shivas Yomim Matzos Teichelu. Eat matzah for 7 days. Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, on the first day you should get rid of the Sa'ir Mibateichem. Ki chol oichel chometz v'nichros ha'nefesh ha'im miYisrael miyom Rishon ad Yom Hashvi, from the first day to the 7th day. So you see clearly that even here it says Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, and then Shivas Yomim Teichlu Matzos, and the pasuk is actually the other way around. But in the same pasuk it mentions the 7th day of Sukkot with Bayom Rishon. So if so, maybe Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu is referring to the first day of Sukkot itself, not the day before Sukkot, in the same way as you explained regarding the Arba Minim. Says the Gemara, Im Kein Nichtav Kra Rishon. If the pasuk would have meant that you have to get rid of the chometz on the first of the 7 days, it wouldn't have said Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu. It would have just said Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, on first day. What's the hay? The first day. What's the Rishon? So the extra hay is telling us that it's not the first of the 7 days. It's a day on its own prior to the 7 days. Rishon normally. Why does it say the extra hay? Shma minoluk the Omron, in order to tell us that it's the 14th. It's the day before. Yehocha, says the Gemara, but look back in the Chumash by the Lulav, what does it say? By Lulav it also says Olekachtem lochem bayom Rishon. Yehocha hasam nami Rishon lomoli. How are you going to explain the extra hay by the Lulav? V'su, and another question. Hasam dichsiv bayom Rishon, regarding the Isam Relocha on Sukkot, it says in the pasuk bayom Rishon Shabbosin ubayom Hashmini Shabbosin. There also it mentions the Yom HaRishon. The first day is Yom Tov. We know the first day of Sukkot is Yom Tov, and the last day of Sukkot is Yom Tov, the 8th day, B'Yom HaShmini, Shmini Atzeres. Amos also there say that Rishon Demi'ikara, in the same way as Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu means the day before Sukkot, maybe there also that the Shivas Yomim, when it says Bayom Rishon Shabbosin, the first day is a Yom Tov, say it's the day before the days of Sukkot. The Mi'ikara Mashma is the day prior to. Says the Gemara, no. Over there, regarding the Issa Malacha, in the same way as we saw regarding the Lulav, that the Lulav, it says, Shivas Yomim, it mentions the whole 7 days, or the 7th day in the same pasuk, so too, regarding the Issa Malacha, Shani Hasam da Omakra, it says at the end of that pasuk, or it says, that's right, it says in the end of that pasuk, da Omakra, Bayom HaShmini Shabbosin. What the pasuk said, Bayom Rishon Shabbosin, uBayom HaShmini Shabbosin. So again, we compare Ma Shmini in the same as the 8th day, is Shmini Dechag is the 8th day of Sukkot. Af Rishon, so too the Bayom Rishon Shabbosin is not the day before Sukkot, it's the first of the days of Sukkot. Af Rishon Dechag is the first day of Yom Tov, not the day before. Ha Rishon normally. If so, why does it say the Hay of Rishon in the pasuk of not doing malacha on Sukkot? Why has it got the extra hay there? Says the Gemara, Lim'utei chol hamoed, to tell us that only the first day, as well as the last day, is Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do malacha, and to the exclusion of the days in between that we know as chol hamoed, which is the weekday days of Yom Tov, which are the days which are chol hamoed. We all know what chol hamoed is, and Mitzvah will learn later on in Shas the halachas of chol hamoed. So we need the Rishon to tell us that it's not from the first day right through to the 8th day you're not allowed to do malacha. No, just the first day and the last day, the days in between, you're allowed to do malachas. Says the Gemara, the very fact that the pasuk says the first day and the 8th day, that alone tells us that the days in between don't have an issa malacha. I don't need the extra hay for that. Says the Gemara, no, it's true. I still need the hay. I may have thought, if you look in that pasuk, it says, in the first day is Yom Tov. And the 8th day is Shabbosin, is a day of Yom Tov, a day of rest. It doesn't say Bayom HaRishon Shabbosin, Bayom HaShmini. It says Bayom HaShmini and the 8th day. That maybe that Vav is Moisif al Inyan Rishon Da'afilu b'Chodesh Shel Moed. Maybe the Vav is telling us the first day and the 8th day in addition to all the days in between. In which case, the Vov is telling us, or could tell us, that on Chol HaMoed, you're not allowed to do melachos. Kamash Malon, that's why I need the Hey of Horishain to say it's only the first day, and then you may do melachos till the last day. If so, says the Gemara, if the Vov would tell us that Chol HaMoed is also to do melacha, and the Hey confirms that you are allowed to do melacha, V'loi lichtoi v'rachmonu loi Vov, v'loi Hey, don't write the Vov, don't write the Hey, and then we'll know that you're allowed to do melacha in Chol HaMoed. And another question, we're now moving to a different pasuk, the pasuk of not doing melachos on Pesach. Ha'osam dichsiv, the pasuk by melacha on Pesach, it says, Bayoim horishoin mikra kodesh yeh lochem kol meleches avoida lo yisasu. The me'ikara mashma, you're going to say Bayoim horishoin means the day prior to, which is what Rav Nachman by Yitzchok suggested, that the word horishoin means not the first of, rather the day prior to. Elo, says the Gemara, Hani shloisha rishoin mi boyelei lekedetoni de Rabbi Shmuel. The truth is that rishoin always means could mean prior to. Like Reb Nachman Yitzchok brought a pasuk harishoin odom tivolit. You brought me 3 psukim that mentions rishoin, and we take it for granted that it's not the day prior to. The pasuk of lulav, the pasuk of not doing melacha on Sukkot, the pasuk of not doing melacha on Pesach. Those are 3 times rishoin. We use them for something else. The Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, Bischar Shloisha Rishoin, in the merit of 3 times that it says Rishoin, Zochu L'Shloisha Rishoin. We're going to be deserving of 3 concepts that are all associated with the word Rishoin. Number 1, Lahachri Zari Shel Esav. We're going to merit destroying the descendants of Esav Arasha. Lebinyan Beis HaMikdash, we're going to be deserving of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, or the building of the Beis HaMikdash. U'v'lishmai shel Mashiach, and we're going to deserve for the name of Mashiach to be revealed. So what do they have to do with the word Rishon? L'hachri zari shel Esav, where do we find that destroying the descendants of Esav has got any association to the word Rishon? D'chsiv, it says in the pasuk says, Vayetze harishon admoini, kuloi ka'aderes seir. So we see that Esav was a Rishon. He was physically speaking, he was the Bechor. He was the firstborn. So we see that Esav is called the Rishon. Ulebinyan Beis HaMikdash. Where do we find that the Binyan Beis HaMikdash is considered Rishon? T'chsiv, it says in the pasuk in Yirmiyah, Kisei kovoid moroim me Rishon mekoim mikdashenu. That there's an association between the place of the Beis HaMikdash and Rishon. Ulishmoi shel Mashiach. Where do we find that the name of Mashiach is associated to the word Rishon? T'chsiv, it says in the pasuk in Yeshaya, Rishon l'tzion hinei hinom v'Yerushalayim mevaser etein. That Mashiach is going to come and give us the good news, is going to bring us the redemption. He's called Rishon l'tzion, and he's called Rishon. We're going to deserve that in the merit of one of these 3 Rishons. Since these 3 Rishons are coming to teach us something else, we cannot deduce from them, or we don't have to assume that they mean what they would mean in other places, as in Ach Bayom Rishon Tashbisu, that it means the day prior to. Continues the Gemara, a 4th source that the Issa of Chometz starts Minatayra from the middle of the day of the 14th. Rava Omar Mehacha. Lo yisishchat al Chometz dam zivchi. You're not allowed to shech the Korban Pesach al Chometz on Chometz whilst owning Chometz. Lo yisishchat Chometz, you're not allowed to shech the Korban Pesach v'adayin Chometz kayim, whilst the Chometz still exists. Asks the Gemara, how does that teach you that at a specific time in the day, for the end of the 6th hour, Chometz is asa? Tashbisu sa'ir mibatechem, v'eima kol chad v'chad ki shachit. Why don't we say that the pasuk is telling us that every single individual, whenever he chooses to shecht his Korban Pesach, he has to have gotten rid of his Chometz before then? If somebody chooses to shecht his Korban Pesach the 9th hour of the day, then so be it. And he'll have to get rid of the Chometz before the 9th hour of the day. Why do we see in this pasuk that it's a fixed time? Says the Gemara, Zman Shchita Omar Achmana. The pasuk, when the pasuk says Lo Yisishchat, it doesn't mean a specific person shouldn't shecht his Korban Pesach. It means the time when anybody and everybody is allowed to shecht the Korban Pesach, where it really starts from the end of the 6th hour. By that point, there's no more Chometz allowed to be found. Tani Namihoch, we find the brisa to that effect. Ach bayom rishon tashbisu sa'or mibatechem. This pasuk that we've been working with, the chiyuv to get rid of the chometz b'yom harishon, me'erev Yom Tov, is referring to the 14th of Nisan, not the 15th. Oyein ele b'yom tov, maybe b'rishon means the 15th, which is something we've been discussing all along. Elo b'yom tov atzmoi, Talmud loima, it says in the pasuk, lo sishchat al chometz dam zivchi, you're not allowed to shech the korban Pesach whilst in the possession of chometz. Lo sishchat es ha-Pesach v'adayin chometz kayim, divrei Rabbi Yishmael. This is Rabbi Yishmael, a different source to the Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael we saw before, but this that we saw here from Rava seems to be the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael in this brisa. That from here we see that from the time that one is allowed to start shechting Korban Pesach, from that time on is the tashbisu is valid, and that's when tashbisu is applies, and one has to get rid of the chometz before then. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Einei tzorich. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't need the pasuk of lo sishchat al chometz dam zivchi. He says, Hareyu oimer ach b'yom harishon tashbisu so'er miboteichem. Rabbi Akiva says that the very fact that the pasuk says that b'yom harishon tashbisu so'er miboteichem, get rid of all the chometz from your homes, uchsiv, and it says another pasuk, v'chol melacha lo yisasu. You're not allowed to do any melacha on Yom Tov. Umotzinu lahav orosh av melacha. We know that making a fire, burning something, is one of the melachos. And the pasuk says Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do melachos. So how can you get rid of the chometz on Yom Tov when on Yom Tov you're not allowed to make a fire? You're allowed to make a fire to cook, but you're not allowed to make a fire to burn chometz. So the very fact that the tashbisu means burning, it must be that it's on Erev Pesach and not on the 15th itself. This is Rabbi Akiva, which is actually a sixth source that the Issa to get rid of chometz must be on Erev Pesach, not on Pesach itself. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Einei tzorich, and this seems to be a seventh source. I said before 6, it's a seventh source. Einei tzorich, I don't need that pasuk. I don't need to learn it out from the fact that you're burning. And we'll soon see in the Gemara that Rabbi Yossi cannot learn it out from tashbisu, because Rabbi Yossi himself actually holds you can get rid of the chometz without burning it. Not like Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Yossi says, Einei tzorich, I've got a different source that the time to get rid of the chometz is b'yom harishon, is the day before Pesach and not on Pesach itself. Hareyu omer ach b'yom harishon tashbisu so'er miboteichem. The pasuk says that b'yom harishon you have to get rid of the chometz. Me'erev Yom Tov einu ela b'Yom Tov. How do we know if b'yom harishon is the day before Yom Tov, or whether b'yom harishon means the first day of Yom Tov itself? Talmud loima, it says in the pasuk, ach b'yom harishon cholok, we split that day, v'i b'yom tov atzmoi, and if the b'yom harishon is talking about the 15th of Nisan, and b'ach means that only part of the day is also to have chometz, but part of the 15th you're allowed to have chometz, mishori, is it permitted to have chometz on the any time on the 15th of Nisan? It can't be. And now we're coming back to what we saw at the beginning of our Omid. We compare the requirement to get rid of the chometz to the prohibition of eating chometz. We compare the issa of eating chometz to the time that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. And since that mitzvah starts, be'erev teichlu matzah, as soon as the 15th starts, it must be that the whole 15th day is also to have chometz. So when it says ach b'yom harishon tashbisu, that part of the yom harishon is a day that you have to get rid of the chometz, it must be referring to the 14th of Nisan and not any time in the 15th of Nisan. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rava, Shma mino mid Rabbi Akiva, from the fact that Rabbi Akiva said that the source that you get rid of the chometz before the 15th and not on the 15th is from the fact that it says tashbisu, and tashbisu you have to do by burning, and burning is a melacha on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to burn anything on Yom Tov unless it's for purposes of cooking. And that's the source that you have to get rid of the chometz before the 15th. Shma mino mid Rabbi Akiva tlas. There's 3 halachas that we can establish that Rabbi Akiva holds. Shma mino ein biur chometz elo sreifa. Number 1, he must hold that when the pasuk says tashbisu, you have to get rid of chometz, it must be with burning. Because if you can do it anywhere else, if you can throw it into the wind, if you can just destroy it, give it to your animals to eat, whatever it is, if there's any other way of doing streifas chometz, biur chometz I should say, then there would be no source for them tashbisu, that it has to be before Yom Tov, maybe it could be on Yom Tov, and even though you're not allowed to burn on Yom Tov, do tashbisu in any other way. So Rabbi Akiva must hold tashbisu must be with burning. Rabbi Yossi argues with that. That's why he needs to find another source. Ushma mino, another halacha we find according to Rabbi Akiva, that havora lechalik yotzes. And this is the Gemara we saw on Shabbos Daf Ayin, that in Hilchos Shabbos it says that there's many melachos. Kol melacha, you're not allowed to do any melacha on Shabbos. And then the Torah singles out that lo sevaru eish, you're not allowed to light a fire. And there's a machlekes in the Gemara as to why the Torah singles out the Isser of lo sevaru eish. Is it to tell us that like the Torah singles out one malacha, so too every malacha is singled out, in as much as if you do a number of malachas, you're chayav independently on each one? Or do we say no? Do we say it's singled out to tell us that the malacha of eish is not considered an av malacha? If you hold that the reason that the havora, the lo sevaru eish, the prohibition of lighting a fire, is singled out to tell us it's not a malacha, then it wouldn't be asa on Yom Tov when it says kol malacha lo yisasu. So Rabbi Akiva says that the reason that tashbisu must be on erev Yom Tov, because you cannot do tashbisu, you cannot light a fire, it must be, he holds, that lighting a fire is one of the obvious malachis. And if it's one of the obvious malachis, it must be that the reason that the lo sevaru eish is singled out is lechalik yotzes, to tell us that every malacha independently carries a chiyuv, chatos, whatever it may be, whatever the punishment is when transgressing it. Ushma mino, another thing we hold of Rabbi Akiva, we see from Rabbi Akiva, is lo yomrin on hoyel v'hutra havora letzorech hutra nami sheloi letzorech. There would be a logic that says that since you're allowed to light a fire on Yom Tov, in contrast to Shabbos, now on Yom Tov you're allowed to, in order to cook, maybe lighting any fire would be allowed even to get rid of chometz. From Rabbi Akiva we see that you don't say this logic of hoyel, of since it's mutter to light a fire, you can burn the chometz. Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold of this. And here Rashi says that Rabbi Yossi obviously holds that lo sevaru eish is not an av melacha. And Rashi adds that in, so it could be that I made a mistake when I said before that according to Rabbi Yossi you can do tashbisu with anything other than burning. It could be that according to Rabbi Yossi you do tashbisu only with burning. Nonetheless, he doesn't hold Rabbi Akiva, because he holds that, according to Rabbi Yossi holds that burning, making a fire, is not an av melacha. He holds that havora is lelav yotzis, that it's just an avera, it's not a melacha, not lechalik yotzis like Rabbi Akiva. Continues the next Gemara. Tanu Rabbanon. Shivas yomim so'ir lo yimotzi beboteichem. And now we're going a little bit more into detail about the fine details of whose chometz and what chometz and in what condition the chometz has to be that you're not allowed to own it on Pesach. We know there's a concept called bal yiroeh ubal yimotze, that chometz may not be seen nor found. And the truth is, it's two different psukim. In one pasuk it says, Shivas yomim so'ir lo yimotze beboteichem, chometz, leaven, should not be found in your homes for 7 days, etc. And another pasuk says, Matzos ye'ochel es shivas hayomim, lo yiro'eh lecha chometz, v'lo yiro'eh lecha so'ir b'chol gvulecha. That chometz or so'ir should not be found, should not be seen in any of your gvul, in any of your boundaries, in any area that belongs to you, not only in your homes. So it's two psukim, lo yimotze and lo yiro'eh. Why it says twice lo yiro'eh lecha, once for chometz, once for so'ir, Rashi brings that to Gemara and Beit Daf Zayin, will be discussed there. So now we really have to understand, since boteichem, homes, are always included in gvulcha, in your gvulecha, in your boundaries, in the areas that belong to you, why do I need to single out batim, boteichem, if I've already said that you're not allowed to see chometz in your gvulecha? So that's going to be the question of the Gemara. Shivas yomim so'ir lo yimotze beboteichem. In your homes, you're not allowed to, chometz may not be found 7 days. Ma talmud loima. Why do I need that? V'lo kvar ne'ema lo yiro'eh lecha so'ir, v'lo yiro'eh lecha chometz b'chol gvulecha. That in any of your places, anything that belongs to you, you're not allowed to see chometz, even if it's not your homes. But of course, even if it is your homes, why do I need the pasuk of lo yimotze, of so'ir lo yimotze beboteichem? Answers the Gemara. We're now going to try and understand the difference. It's true that in one pasuk it speaks about Boteichem, and in another pasuk it speaks about Gvulecha. But there's another difference between the two psukim. That in the one pasuk where it says Lo Yimotze, that chometz may not be found, it doesn't say you're not allowed to see it. It says it even is not allowed to be found. It doesn't say it has to be your chometz. It says no, So'er Lo Yimotze. Leaven shouldn't be found. In the second pasuk, the pasuk of Lo Yiroeh, it says Lo Yiroeh L'cha. You, it mustn't be seen to you. Number one, the prohibition is to be seen, not to be found, but to be seen. And the second one is L'cha. It's something associated to you, but chometz that's not L'cha maybe is not included in that bracket. So you're asking a question, why do I need the pasuk of Lo Yimotze B'Boteichem? The reason is because there's something in Lo Yimotze B'Boteichem that we would not know from the Lo Yiroeh L'cha chometz. The Gemara is going to explain that. Lefi shene'emar Lo Yiroeh L'cha So'er. Because it says in the pasuk Lo Yiroeh L'cha So'er, Shelecha Iyatoroyeh. That pasuk is telling us that you're not allowed to see your chometz, but somebody else's chometz, provided that you have not taken responsibility for their chometz. And Rashi says this is talking about the chometz belonging to a goy that you do not have responsibility for, b'shel gavoya, or if it belongs to hektish, there's no isser of bal yiroeh. So if you have chometz of hektish in your house, or chometz belonging to a goy that you have not taken responsibility for, then you have not transgressed bal yiroeh and bal yimotze. That's what I learned from the pasuk of Lo Yiroeh L'cha chometz. What do I learn from the pasuk of Lo Yimotze? Yochil Yatmin. From the pasuk of Lo Yiroeh L'cha, I'll just know you're not allowed to see chometz. I'm not allowed to see my own chometz. What happens if I hide my chometz? Yochil Yatmin. Maybe if I hide my chometz, or v'yakabel pikdonos, if I receive deposits from a goy that I have responsibility for, and if they get lost or stolen, I need to pay for them. Min anochri from a goy. Maybe over there also we'll say it's not l'cha, Lo Yiroeh L'cha. It belongs to the goy. So what? I've taken responsibility. It's not mine. Or it's hidden. It's mine, but it's hidden. It's not Lo Yiroeh. Lo Yiroeh means don't see. I'm not seeing it. So I may have thought in these two circumstances it would be mutter. Talmud Lo Yimotze. That's why I need the second pasuk of Lo Yimotze B'Boteichem. That chometz may not be found, even if it's not yours. Providing you have responsibility for it, then you've transgressed the issa of bal yimotze. Even if you cannot see it, you've hidden it, you're going to be chayiv, because it says Lo Yimotze, it shouldn't be found, even if you cannot see it. Now the Bryce is continuing with a few cryptic lines, and there's going to be two ways of understanding it later in the Gemara. Ein li elo b'nochri. And I'm going to explain this now based on Rabbi's explanation, which fits into the Bryce without having to change it. Ein li elo b'nochri. I may have thought that when we learn out from Lo Yiroeh L'cha, that shel acherim, which means chometz that belongs to a goy that you do not have responsibility for, there is no bal yiroeh bal yimotze. I may have thought that's only true when the goy is not b'nochri sheloi kibashtoi ve'ein shorim cha b'chotzer. You're not dominating over him. You're not dominating over him, and he's not living with you in the chotzer. Only then, providing you don't have responsibility for it, then you don't have the issa of bal yiroeh ubal yimotze. But nochri shekibashtoi, however, a goy that you dominate over, v'shorim cha b'chotzer, and he's living with you in your own chotzer. Minayin, how do you know even then you're not chayav for his chometz, providing that you haven't taken responsibility for it? Talmud Lo Yimotze B'Boteichem. That's what we have, the extra pasuk Lo Yimotze, to tell you that even then you're allowed to. You have not transgressed bal yiroeh bal yimotze. How do you learn heta from the words Lo Yimotze? The Gemara says there's an extra word lecha in another pasuk that it seems that we do not need it, superfluous in that pasuk, and we attach it to the words Lo Yimotze. It's as if it says Lo Yimotze lecha. There's a certain element of Lo Yimotze which is restricted to lecha. It has to be yours, and what it means is that you're only chayiv if you take responsibility for it. If you do not take responsibility for it, even if you are dominating over the goy and he's in your chotzer, nonetheless you have not transgressed bal yiroeh bal yimotze. That's an easy reading of the Brisa according to Rava. Continues the Gemara. Ein li elo shebeboteichem. from the words, from the pasuk of Lo yimotze bebotechem, I only know that you're not allowed to have chometz in your homes, in your house. Beboiros, b'shichin, b'ma'oros, if in your caves and other areas, the pits, the caves, the cisterns, however you translate boiros, shichin, and ma'oros, different types of caves, that in those cases, it's not called bayis, it's not my home. Maybe there's no issa to have chometz. Minayin, how do you know that you're not allowed to own chometz there? Talmud leima b'chol gvulecha. That's why I have the other pasuk of lo yiroy lecha, that it says b'chol gvulecha, in any area that belongs to you, even if it's not your home. And now the Gemara says, v'adayin ani yomer. And now if we put all the pieces together, what are we left with? That bebatim over mishum baliro balimotze, that the pasuk of in your homes, in your home, where it says so'ir lo yimotze bebotechem, and the pasuk that talks about the batim actually mentions yimotze. It happens to be batim is also gvulecha, and anything you'll be over in gvulecha, you're going to be over in your bayis, obviously. But here in the batim, over mishum baliro balimotze. Ubal yatmin, you're also chayiv if you hide your own chometz, because in the pasuk talking about the homes, it says lo yimotze. It doesn't say lo yiroy, it says lo yimotze. Ubal yirkabel pikdoinus min anochri. And also, you're chayiv if you receive deposits from a goy, providing you took responsibility on them. Then you're chayiv, because it doesn't say lecha in this pasuk, it only says lecha in the pasuk of lo yiroy lecha. Bigvulin, if it's not in your homes, if it's in boirei sichinum oris, and regarding to the pasuk of gvulin, the pasuk that speaks about kol gvulecha, it says lo yiroeh lecha, that the isser is restricted to yiroeh and it's restricted to lecha. Shelecha yatoroya, that you're only not allowed to see your own chometz, avl atoroya shelacherim shel gavoya, but you're allowed to see the chometz belonging to hekdesh or belonging to a goy. That means they're both excluded from lecha, they're not yours, providing you didn't take responsibility for the chometz of the goy, you're not chayiv. Asks the Gemara, minayin litein es ha'omor shel zeh, how do we know that the chumrah of batim, that you're chayiv even for if you hide the chometz, and you're chayiv even for goy's chometz if you took responsibility? How do you know that that chumrah is bezeh also applies to gvulim, to any area that belongs to you, even if it's not a home? V'shel zeh, and how do I know that the leniencies that we learn from lo yiroy lecha chometz, which means that chometz of hekdesh and chometz of a goy that you've not taken responsibility for, that you're not chayev for bal yiroy bal yimotze, how do you know that applies even to batim, even to homes? Because in the pasuk that says lo yiroy lecha, it only mentions gvulecha, it doesn't mention batim. Talmud Loima says the Gemara, so'ir so'ir l'gzeira shava, there's twice the word so'ir that we compare with each other. Ne'emar so'ir bebatim. In the pasuk of lo yimotze bebotechem, it says so'ir. It says shivas yomim so'ir lo yimotze bebotechem. So'ir lo yimotze bebotechem. V'ne'emar, and it says so'ir begvulim, regarding the places outside your homes, but in your domain, in your it's yours, in your gvul. It also says the word so'ir. It says in the pasuk lo yiroy lecha so'ir b'chol gvulecha. That's that second pasuk. Ma sa'ir amura bebatim. In the same way as regarding batim, where it says sa'ir, regarding the lo yimotze pasuk, where it says lo yimotze bebotechem, where over mishum bal yiroy bal yimotze u bal yatmin u bal yikabel pikdoinus min anochri. The same way as over there's the chumrah, the yuchayev, even if you can't see the chometz, and even if it's the goy's chometz, providing you took responsibility for it. Af sa'ir amur begvulim. So too regarding the prohibition of chometz in the gvulim, in the places outside your homes, over mishum bal yiroy bal yimotze u bal yatmin u bal yikabel pikdoinus min anochri. You're also chayev for you're chayev even if it's hidden, and even if it belongs to the goy, if you took responsibility for it. Uma sa'ir amur begvulim, in the same way, now we're comparing it the other way around. In the same way as it says sa'ir by the pasuk of lo yiroy lecha sa'ir, that shelecha yatoroya, you're not allowed to see your own chometz, or chometz that you took responsibility for. But if it belongs to a goy, if you didn't take responsibility for it, if it belongs to hekdesh, then you're potter. So too regarding the batim in your homes, you're only going to be over bal yiroy or bal yimotze if it's yours. If it belongs to a goy, in the event that you did not take responsibility for it, or it belongs to hekdesh, you have not transgressed the issa of bal yiroy or bal yimotze. That's a long brisa, and that is a well-explained brisa, and I added in the bits that I needed to add in, just that we should understand it based on what we're going to see in the Gemara now. Omar Mar. So first, the Gemara is going back to that section in the brisa that tries to differentiate between a goy that you're dominating over and lives in your chotzer and not. So Omar Mar. We saw in the brisa, Ein li elo benochri sheloi kibashtoi, ve'ein shorim cha b'chotzer. This that we said only applies to a goy that you're not dominating over and he's not with you living in your chotzer. However, nochri shekibashtoi, ve'shorim cha b'chotzer minayin. How do we know that even there the same applies? Talmud loyma lo yimotzei. That's what we learned from the pasuk of lo yimotzei. And I've especially read the words very vaguely. Why? Because the Gemara now is going to want to understand this. The pashtus, the easiest way of reading these words, is that it's a follow-on in the brisa. The brisa just before that said that from lo yimotzei I learned that even if you hide your chometz, or even if it's a goy's chometz that you've taken responsibility for, you're chayav for lo yimotzei. And immediately after that, the brisa says, Ein li elo benochri. So it would make sense that we read the brisa as follows. Not like I read it, because I read it the way Rav is going to explain it. But the way that the Gemara is initially understanding the brisa, the way we would read it is as follows. Ainly what type of pikdonos, of what type of deposits from a goy that you took responsibility for? Are you chayav benochri shaloi kibashtei, a goy that you're not dominating over? Ve'en shorim cha b'chotzer. Nochri shekibashtei v'shorim cha b'chotzer, but a goy that you are dominating over and he's living with you in the chotzer minayin. How do you know that there also you're chayav? Talmud loyma lo yimotzi b'otechem. It said lo yimotzi. It mustn't be found even if you're not dominating over the goy. And that doesn't make sense, because if you're not dominating in the goy, there's less reason to be chayav, not more reason to be chayav. And here the Gemara is saying that according to how we understand this, ein li elo, that you're only chayav if you're not dominating over him. If you are dominating over him, how do you know you're chayav? Of course you're chayav. You're even more chayav if you're dominating over him than if you're not dominating over him. So that's what the Gemara asks, klapelai. How do we hold these words in the brisa? It doesn't make sense. If this part of the brisa is following the part of the brisa just before it, that there's a chiyuv of bali motzei for deposits of a goy that you've taken a chrayas for, then there's more reason to be chayav when you're dominating over him than when you're not dominating over him. And that's the opposite of what the brisa seems to be saying. So Omar Abai Eipach. Abai actually says, turn it round. So we're going back to the brisa. You have to read the brisa the opposite way round. That that means first the brisa says, Yochel yatmin v'kabel pikdoinus min anochri Talmud loymar lo yimotzei. From lo yimotzei you learn that if you receive deposits from a goy that you took responsibility for, you're chayav, lo yimotzei. And then the brisa continues, Ein li elo nochri shekivashtoi, not sheloi kivashto. You have to turn it round. I would only know that you're chayav if the goy is dominated by you and he's in your chotzer. How do I know that even if he's not dominated by you and he's not in your chotzer, you're also chayav if you took responsibility for his chometz? Talmud loyma lo yimotzei. According to Abaye, that's how you have to read the brisa. Eipach, turn it round. Rava Omar, Rava is going to explain like we read the brisa. Lo'olam loy teifach. Don't turn over the brisa, don't change the order. Va'aresha koi, it's going on the first halacha. The first halacha that says that you learn out from lo yiroy lecha, that if it's a goy's chometz that you've not taken responsibility for, indeed you're potter from Bal Yiroy, because it's not lecha in any way. And that the brisa is saying, Ein li elo benochri sheloi kivashto, maybe you're only potter from Bal Yiroy for a goy's chometz that you don't have responsibility for, is only if the goy is not dominated by you and not in your chotzer. But if he's dominated by you and in your chotzer, then his money is, so to speak, your money. Maybe you will be chayav. Talmud loyma lo yimotzei. Let's see that inside. Rava Omar lo'ilam loy teifach v'areisha koi, it's going on the first halacha. Shelachoy atoroya, you're only not allowed to see your own chometz, aval atoroya shelachirim, but a goy's chometz that you did not take responsibility for, v'shel gavoya or hektish, there you're potter. Ein li elo benochri sheloi kivashtoi ve'ein shorim cha b'chotzer. I may have thought that's only a goy that you're not dominating over and he's not in your chotzer with you. Nochri shekivashtoi ve'shorim cha b'chotzer, a goy that you are dominating over and he's in your chotzer. Minayin, how do you know that even there you're exempt from the goy's chometz if you didn't take responsibility? Talmud loyma lo yimotzei, that you're exempt because it says lo yimotzei. And here the Gemara is asking straight away, I don't understand. You're looking for an exemption that even when you're dominating over the goy, if you didn't take responsibility for his chometz, that you're potter. How do you see an exemption from lo yimotzei? Lo yimotzei means it mustn't be found. It's always a stringency, as we've seen in the Gemara. V'hai tana mehader atera. You're looking for a source that something is mutter. V'nosiv lo surah, and you bring the words lo yimotzei, which is a pasuk that tells you an issa. Says the Gemara, and this is how we explain the Brisa, Mishum Shenemar, there's another pasuk, there's two psukim by Bal Yeroeh. One pasuk in Parshas Boy we've been speaking about all along, Lo Yirah Lecha Chometz V'Lo Yirah Lecha So'er B'Chol Gvulecha. But however, there's another pasuk in Parshas Re'eh that says, Lo Yirah Lecha So'er B'Chol Gvulecha Shivas Yomim. I have an extra lecha there. I don't need it for Bal Yeroeh because I have it in Parshas Boy, Lo Yirah Lecha So'er V'Lo Yirah Lecha Chometz V'Lo Yirah Lecha So'er. So why do I need lecha trazim? Now why do I need the second lecha? It's going back on lo yimotzei. So it's as if it says in the Torah, lo yimotzei lecha. Even though from lo yiroeh lecha we exempted a person from bal yiroeh if it's not his. For example, if it's hekdesh and if it belongs to a goy that he did not take responsibility for. But lo yimotzei, which is a stringency that says that you're chayev, even there's a certain lecha. You're chayev even if it's not yours, provided that you take responsibility. Then lo yimotzei, even if it's not lecha. If you took responsibility for the guy's chometz, you're chayev. However, lecha, even there's a certain element of lecha that applies, and that is that even if the goy is dominated by you and in your chotza, it's not lecha. It's only lecha if you took responsibility for the chometz. If you took responsibility, then there's a lo yimotzei, even though it's not yours. But if you didn't take responsibility, then you are potter, even if he's dominated by you and in your chotza. Continues the Gemara, Omar Mar. And all the while, we've very nicely explained this Gemara that it all makes sense because I've constantly differentiating between acherim, which is mutter, and we say it's a goy's chometz you've not taken responsibility for, and pikabel pikdoinis min anochri, getting deposits from a goy where you are chayev, and we've been explaining that it means where you did take responsibility for. Well, I didn't make that up. It's going to be the Gemara, because if you read the Brisa at face value, it seems to be contradicting each other all the time. Is a goy's chometz chayev? Is it not chayev? On the one hand, we learn that from lo yiroeh lecha that shel acherim, a goy's chometz is not chayev, but from bal yimotzei we learn that mikabel pikdoinis min anochri, you are chayev. How are we supposed to read the Brisa? So in order not to confuse anyone, I explain the Gemara based on what the Gemara is going to say now. Omar Mar, Yochel Yatzmin v'Yikabel Pikdoinus min Anochri. I may have thought that if you hide chometz and then you're not seeing it, or v'Yikabel Pikdoinus min Anochrim, if you're receiving deposits from a goy that you're not chayev. Talmud Loima Lo Yimotzei. No, we learn now from Lo Yimotzei that you are chayev. Asks the Gemara a contradiction. Omrus, you said a line earlier. Omrus Reisha, Shelechoy Atoroya, from Lo Yiroeh Lecha we learn that you're only not allowed to see your chometz. Aval Atoroya Shelacherim V'Shel Gavoya. But other chometz, like the chometz of a goy or hekdesh, you are allowed to see. So make up your mind, or you're allowed to see a goy's chometz, or you're not allowed to see a goy's chometz. Lo Kasha, says the Gemara. How the Kibbel Oleh Achrayis, the part of the Brisa that says that Mekabel Pikdoinis from Anochri Yochayev from Lo Yimotzei is talking about you took responsibility for the chometz. But where we saw that Shel Gavoya v'Shel Acherim, which you're not chayev for Bal Yiroeh, there is talking about you didn't take responsibility. You didn't take responsibility, then it's not yours, and you're not chayev for Bal Yiroeh and Bal Yimotzei. And Kihad Omar Luhu Rava lebnei Mechuza, that is where we see that Rava said to the people in his town was called Mechuza, Be'iru Chamira, get rid of, destroy the chometz, the bnei chela, from the Gentile soldiers that they've left in your house, they've deposited in your house, burn it, get rid of it before Pesach. Mibateichu, from your homes. Why? Kiven de ilu migna ve'ilu misvid. Because if they would get stolen or lost from your homes, birshusaychi koi, it's, so to speak, it was in your possession and your responsibility, ubaisu lishlume, and you'd have to pay for it. Since you have to pay for it and you're responsible for it, on some level it's considered yours. And we learn from Lo Yimotzei that you have to get rid of it before Pesach. Kedelechoin domi, it's like yours, because if it gets lost, you have to pay for it. That's called taking responsibility for it. Therefore, it's considered yours get rid of it. V'asar, you're not allowed to have it over Pesach. Now the Gemara is saying, according to Reb Shimon and Baba Kama Daf Ein Aleph Amud Beis, who says that Dova HaGoyrim L'Momin, even if something is not mine, but it could cause me to have to pay money. Kamomin Domi, it's as if it's my money. For example, if you take responsibility for something, and that something is not yours, but if it gets lost or stolen, you have to pay out of pocket, then on a certain level, that object is yours. So according to Reb Shimon, who holds that way, we can understand that taking a chrayis means dova goyrem lemomin, it could cause you to have to pay money, and it's kamomin, it's like it's yours. We can understand you're not allowed to own it on Pesach. If you hold that even something which is going to cause money, now it's not my money, so this is a goy's chometz, even if I'm responsible to pay if it gets lost, but it's not mine. It's dova goyrem lemomin lav kamomin. Why should I be chayiv on Pesach? Why should I have to get rid of it? Why do you say that? Why do we say that Yikabel Pigdoinus Min Anochri? You're chayiv. Says the Gemara, you're right. Under normal circumstances, it's not considered yours. But Shani Hocha de Omar Lo Yimotze, since the Pasuk is being very stringent, there's a Bali Roa and a Bali Motze, and so many Psukim telling us about how much Chometz is not allowed to be found in your Rishus, there's coming to include that even though it's only a Dova Goyrem L'Momin, it's only going to cause you to have to lay out money, but it's not really your money, then even though the rest of the Torah, all the other halachot, it's Lav Kamomin, regarding chometz, it's considered kamomin, and you have to get rid of it. There's a slightly different version to this Gemara. The opinion who says that if something that is just a cause, if it's goyrem lemomin, which means it's not yours, but if it gets lost, you have to pay for it. It's considered your. That is not considered your money. Then then I can understand why I need the pasuk of lo yimotze to say that even in that case, you have to get rid of the chometz. According to Reb Shimon, who says that in the whole Torah, anything that could cause you to pay money out of pocket is as if it's already now your money. Lo yimotze lomali. Why do I need the pasuk of lo yimotze? And like the Gemara says, like the Brisa said, that without the words lo yimotze, I may have thought that this chometz that belongs to a goy, that you have responsibility for, I would have thought even then it's mutter, like chometz of a goy that you're not taking responsibility for. And the Brisa said, from lo yimotze I learn that you are chayav for it. According to Reb Shimon, why do I need lo yimotze? The very fact that I take responsibility for it in the whole Torah, to dovar agoyrim lemomin kamomin domit, as if it's yours. Why on earth would you have thought that you're not chayav for it? Why do I need the words lo yimotze for that? It's your chometz. Kamomin, it's like your money. Says the Gemara, no. Itzrach, I need the lo yimotze even according to Reb Shimon. Sol kodatach, I may have thought. You're right that if it gets stolen or lost, I have to pay. And according to Reb Shimon, anything that could cause me to pay out of pocket is, so to speak, mine. But let's look at it the other way. If they were going to come back for it, all the while that it's not been lost and not been stolen, when the soldiers, in the case of the soldiers, or any guy that deposits something with the Yisrael, if the guy comes back for it and you just give him the item as is. Here, it's your item. It's not mine. It's yours. Take it back. You're right, if it gets lost, I need to pay out of pocket, but it's not lost, it's here. And it's yours, you're going to take this item back. You're not going to come to me asking me for money, you're going to come back and ask me for your deposit. So since it's yours, I may have thought, Lav b'reshus, it's considered as if it's not in my reshus, as if it's not my chometz. Komash malon, that's why we need lo yimotze, even according to Reb Shimon, to say that even though it's here, and normally dova goyim lemomin kamomin, but even though it's here and I'm going to give it back, as is, nonetheless, you're chayev, and you have to get rid of it before Pesach. And the Mirat Hashem in the next year, we're going to continue from here.